and the quiet toll of unresolved thoughts. But all that faded the moment he noticed the note, a piece of paper folded in half, propped delicately on his pillow like an invitation to disaster. Jenna's handwriting was familiar but cold, a blend of loopy and jagged strokes. The note read with a casual venom, "Gone for the week with Trey. Keep yourself entertained. Emily next door might be willing to lend you some company I'm sure her husband would be thrilled to watch." In that instant, their bed, felt sullied, as if it bore the weight of her unfaithful escapades. Rage bubbled up, choking him, his pulse drumming in his temples. Derek could imagine Jenna off with Trey, laughing about this very moment, mocking the kind of man who would swallow his pride and wait. He wasn't that man. Jenna had underestimated him this time. Derek let the note fall from his hand and stared at it, lying there on the bed as if mocking him. He replayed her words in his mind, their smug suggestion, that sneering tone Jenna must have had as she wrote each line, every sentence crafted to cut him as sharply as a razor. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the satisfaction she took in it, the flaunting of her infidelity. With Trey. Of all people, Trey, her loud, swaggering coworker who practically oozed ego every time he came around. Derek had once dismissed him as harmless, a clown, someone Jenna would never take seriously. And yet here he was, the star of her twisted theater of betrayal. For a moment, Derek considered tearing the note apart, ripping it to shreds and burning every scrap in the sink. But a wiser part of him stilled his hands. No, he thought, he'd keep it. This note was evidence, a piece of the puzzle that was Jenna's deception. If Jenna thought she could rub his nose in her betrayal and get away with it, she was wrong. He paced to the window and in a moment of bitter curiosity looked over at the neighbor's house. Emily. They'd been friendly over the years, had exchanged a few laughs and shared holiday treats. But he'd never thought of her in the way Jenna had implied, nor had he paid much attention to her husband. How casually Jenna had dragged Emily and her husband into this, pawns in a game they hadn't asked to play. Derek could picture it now, Jenna smirking, thinking he'd do something desperate or foolish just as unfaithful as she was. Jenna was expecting him to react, maybe even to break down, or try to reach her with some pleading text or a late-night call. The irony was she would have won if he did any of that. She was counting on him to give her that satisfaction. And just like that, Derek's anger took on a deadly kind of calm. He wasn't going to call. He wasn't going to make a scene. He'd wait, bide his time until she came back with Trey. That's when he'd make his move. Derek had always been methodical. He handled conflict at work with patience and control. He'd watched too many colleagues let emotions take over, ruin their careers with one ill-timed outburst. Not him. This situation with Jenna and Trey would be no different. He wasn't about to let Jenna have the upper hand, especially not when he still had so many unanswered questions. What had she told their friends? Did her family know? And what about Trey? How long had this gone on under his nose? For now, Derek's plan was simple: wait, watch, and confront. He wasn't entirely sure yet what that confrontation would look like, but he knew it would be one Jenna and Trey wouldn't soon forget. And this time he'd be the one controlling the script, guiding the scene exactly as he wanted it to unfold. As he lay down on the bed that night, a familiar place turned hostile. He felt a strange sense of clarity settle over him. He wasn't afraid of the pain Jenna's betrayal brought. If anything, it sharpened him, pulling him from the haze of everyday life and jolting him into awareness. Tomorrow he'd start making his preparations. The first would be a quiet visit to an old friend, a lawyer. Derek barely slept that night. Lying awake in the darkness, his mind working through a myriad of ways to handle what Jenna had thrown at him. Every corner of the house held memories of her, and now each one felt like it was laughing at him, taunting him with whispers of betrayal. Morning came, bringing with it a sharp, renewed sense of purpose. Jenna thought she'd trapped him, humiliated him, but she was in for a surprise. After a quick, silent breakfast, he made a call to his old friend and lawyer, Tom Grayson. They'd known each other since college, and Tom was a man Derek trusted, a bulldog in the courtroom and fiercely protective of his friends. Derek didn't need much detail, just a consultation. The words "I need advice" were enough for Tom to respond with a sharp intake of breath and a meeting time. My office, 11 o'clock. And Derek, bring everything. An hour later, Derek sat across from Tom in his sleek office, hands folded and eyes steely as he recounted the note Jenna left and the details of her trip with Trey. Tom listened intently, his mouth tightening as the story unfolded, nodding occasionally as he tapped his pen against the notepad. "Let me get this straight," Tom finally said, leaning back in his chair. "She left a note, flaunting her affair, basically daring you to react. Derek nodded, biting back the sharp anger that rose every time he pictured the note. She thinks she's untouchable, and she's practically flaunting it. I'm not letting her get away with this. Good, Tom replied, his face twisting into a hard smile. Now, let's talk options. I can get a private investigator on this. We'll document everything. But Derek, he added, voice dropping to a serious tone, you need to play this smart. No heated confrontations, no rash decisions. This could get ugly fast, and you need to protect yourself. Derek listened, absorbing Tom's advice, feeling the anger within him begin to simmer, transforming into something colder, something more controlled. He nodded, his mind settling with a determination he hadn't felt in years. I can do that, he replied, his voice a low rumble. This time I'll stay calm. Good man, Tom said, reaching over to clasp Derek's shoulder firmly. We'll take this one step at a time. And Derek, don't let her see you coming. Leaving Tom's office, Derek felt an unexpected surge of satisfaction. Jenna might have expected him to break down, to retaliate wildly, but she had miscalculated. He'd let her and Trey play out their affair, all the while gathering evidence, and when he was ready, he'd use every piece against them, taking apart their deceit step by step. By the time Derek arrived home, a quiet resolve had settled over him. He poured himself a cup of coffee, looking out the window at the calm suburban street. From here, everything looked normal. To an outsider, his life was picturesque, with a nice house, a steady career, and a loving marriage, or so it had seemed. The irony was bitter, but it fueled him, reminding him that this was more than just about Jenna's betrayal. It was about reclaiming control, about refusing to be made a fool. Over the next few days, Derek followed through on Tom's advice, keeping his head down and going through the motions of his life as if nothing had happened. He moved with careful precision, planning every move with the kind of discipline he once reserved for his most high-stakes project. It was the quiet before the storm, and he felt a strange thrill knowing he held the reins, that Jenna's confidence in her secrecy was the very thing that would lead to her downfall. In the stillness of their home, Derek waited, watching the door each night, knowing Jenna would return soon. As the days wore on, Derek maintained his calm, keeping his focus on the plan. Every evening he came home to the quiet, empty house, Jenna's absence a brutal reminder of her betrayal. But he forced himself to push down the anger, the betrayal, storing it away for the right moment. He needed a clear mind to follow through on the steps Tom had laid out. By the third night, Derek finally got a call from the private investigator Tom had recommended, a quiet, diligent guy named Victor, with decades of experience dealing with exactly these kinds of situations. Victor's voice was low, almost soothing, as he shared what he'd learned so far. He'd tracked Jenna and Trey to a beach resort 2 hours away, a place they'd booked under fake names to avoid leaving a clear trail. Victor had snapped several damning photos of the two of them together dining, walking arm in arm, and sharing a suite. These are crystal clear, Victor told Derek, his tone professional but carrying a hint of sympathy. Everything you need to prove the affair beyond a shadow of a doubt. If you want, I can dig deeper. But this evidence alone will hold up in any court. Derek clenched his jaw, gripping his phone so tightly he could feel the edge pressing into his palm. No, that's enough, he replied. He didn't need to know every sordid detail. He had enough to confront Jenna and Trey with hard proof. He thanked Victor and hung up, staring at the empty space around him, feeling both satisfaction and a hollow ache where his marriage once was. Friday night, the day Jenna was supposed to come back, he made sure everything was in place. He laid the photos and the note on the coffee table, his hand steady despite the simmering anger coursing through him. Each image Victor had captured felt like a knife, a twisted record of the life Jenna had chosen behind his back. But it was also his ammunition. Tonight, there'd be no more lies, no room for Jenna to manipulate her way out of the truth. Around midnight, he heard her car pull into the driveway. Derek felt a chill pass over him, an icy calm settling into his bones. He heard the sound of her keys jingle as she opened the door, her footsteps tapping lightly across the foyer as she entered. Derek, Jenna's voice floated in from the hallway, that familiar edge of irritation mixed with surprise. Are you still up? He didn't answer, letting her find him in the living room. She stopped in the doorway, blinking as her gaze fell on the coffee table. Her eyes flickered from the note to the photographs, then up to meet his cold stare. He watched her face shift from confusion to realization, the color draining from her cheeks as she registered what was in front of her. What is this?" she stammered, trying to laugh it off. But the fear in her voice betrayed her. "You tell me, Jenna?" Derek's voice was low, laced with controlled fury. "You left the note. You gave me permission to entertain myself. So I decided to entertain myself by finding out exactly what you've been doing with Trey." Jenna swallowed, taking a shaky step back as her eyes darted between him and the photos. She looked trapped, caught off guard in a way that satisfied Derek more than he'd anticipated. She opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand, silencing her. "No excuses, Jenna. I don't want to hear it. I know everything." He let each word land like a hammer, watching as she visibly crumbled. She'd spent days assuming she was untouchable, that he'd be too weak or too afraid to confront her. But she'd been wrong. For the first time, Jenna had no clever remark, no biting sarcasm. All she had was a stunned silence. And Derek felt the first true sense of control in weeks. Tonight, Jenna would feel the weight of what she'd done, and he would make sure she understood that the life she'd taken for granted was about to fall apart. Jenna's eyes darted back and forth between the photos, the damning evidence of her betrayal scattered on the table like shards of broken glass. Her mouth opened, then closed, as if searching for the right words to explain away the inexcusable. But Derek saw the look in her eyes. She knew there was no explanation that would save her this time. "Derek, she finally managed, voice trembling. She took a step forward, reaching a hand toward him, but he held up a finger, his expression unyielding. "Don't," he said coldly. "You don't get to touch me after this." Her hand froze mid-air, and she dropped it, letting it fall limply to her side. Derek felt a hollow satisfaction at the sight of her discomfort, the faltering vulnerability on a face that had been so confidently cruel in her note. "Why?" he demanded, his voice steady but seething. "Was it boredom? Did you just wake up one day and decide that wrecking our marriage was a fun way to pass the time?" Jenna's gaze fell to the floor. Her once sharp expression softened now, showing hints of fear and regret. "Derek, please, it was a mistake, just a lapse in judgment," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Lapse in judgment," Derek laughed, the sound bitter and biting. "A lapse in judgment is a bad decision at the grocery store, Jenna. This," he gestured at the photos with a sweeping hand, "this is premeditated betrayal. You left a note mocking me, practically daring me to find out." He took a step closer, forcing her to meet his gaze. "So I did, and here we are." She swallowed, visibly struggling to hold herself together. I never thought it would go this far. I never meant to hurt you, Derek." "Never meant to hurt me?" Derek's voice rose, each word fueled by months of suppressed anger and heartbreak. "You went away with Trey, taunting me like I was some kind of fool. You thought I'd just sit here, didn't you? Quiet and obedient, waiting while you ran off to live your double life. You wanted me to play the part of the idiot husband, completely blind to what was going on." Jenna's eyes shimmered with tears now, her lips trembling as she tried to form a response. "Derek, I don't even know why I did it. I was lost. Spare me the self-pity," he snapped, his words slicing through her excuses. "You knew exactly what you were doing. And let me tell you something, Jenna, I am done letting you make a fool of me." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the weight of all the things left unsaid over the past months. Jenna looked down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She knew he was right. There was no hiding from it now. The facade she had carefully crafted, the lies she'd woven so casually, were crumbling around her. Derek stepped back, folding his arms, his expression hard as stone. "Here's how this is going to go. You're going to pack a bag and get out. Tonight. I don't want to see you here in the morning. I don't want to see you ever again." His words were final, each one landing with the weight of a gavel. Jenna's mouth opened in protest, a spark of defiance flickering to life. "You can't just—" "Oh, but I can," Derek interrupted, his voice dangerously low. "I've already met with my lawyer. There's no fight you can put up that will change the outcome. You've lost everything you thought you'd taken for granted, Jenna. You gambled with our life, with my trust, and now you're going to live with the consequences." For the first time since she'd walked through the door, Jenna looked truly shaken. She was staring down a reality she hadn't anticipated, the cost of a reckless affair spiraling into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Derek turned his back to her, a gesture so cold and final it drained the color from her face. "Get out, Jenna, and don't come back." He didn't need to look at her to know that her face was streaked with tears, her shoulders trembling with the weight of her actions. He listened as her footsteps retreated down the hall, as the door clicked shut behind her. When he was finally alone, a strange calm settled over him. The life he'd known was gone, but he had survived this first step, reclaiming his dignity in a way she could never take from him again. Derek stood in the quiet aftermath, letting the silence seep in like a balm over the raw wounds Jenna had left behind. He half expected some rush of emotion, a breakdown, anger that would send him hurling the framed photos off the wall, or maybe even regret for ending it all so finally. But instead he felt a profound, almost unsettling calm settle into his bones. The house, stripped of her presence, felt different now, emptier. Yes, but also clearer, like he could finally breathe without the shadow of betrayal looming over him. He took a deep breath, inhaling the sterile scent of his home, now scrubbed clean of her lies, her secrets, her audacious cruelty. He looked down at the coffee table where the photos and notes still lay. They were harsh reminders of the woman Jenna had become, or perhaps the woman she had always been, hidden beneath a mask of familiarity. Derek stared at the note one last time, committing her scrawled words to memory, the sheer audacity of them fueling a new resolve. He folded the note, placed it carefully in an envelope, and slid it into a drawer in the kitchen. Evidence. A reminder. Proof of why this ending was necessary. As he closed the drawer, his phone buzzed, shattering the silence. He glanced at the screen, and his pulse quickened. It was a message from Emily, his neighbor, the one Jenna had so callously dragged into her twisted web. "Hey, Derek. I just saw Jenna leave. Are you okay? If you need anything, I'm here." For a moment he considered ignoring it, brushing it off as sympathy he didn't need. But then he remembered Jenna's taunting suggestion about Emily. She'd thrown Emily's name out as a weapon, something to bait and humiliate him. The thought made his anger spark again, but it was tempered now, refined into something far more focused. He typed back, keeping his message simple. "Thanks, Emily. I might take you up on that. Just trying to wrap my head around everything." Her response came quickly. "Anytime. Honestly, come by even if it's just to talk. I know this has to be hard." Derek let out a slow breath, his fingers hovering over the screen as he considered his next move. Emily had always been kind to him, a warm presence whenever they exchanged words over the fence or during neighborhood gatherings. He remembered Jenna's snide remark about Emily's husband being thrilled to watch a jab that now felt even more absurd. Jenna's bitterness hadn't tainted Emily, though. Her offer was genuine, and he found himself curious about that warmth, about the comfort she'd extended. Without overthinking it, Derek grabbed his jacket and walked out the door, crossing the driveway and making his way to Emily's front steps. He felt the oddness of this, showing up at her door, but the idea of sitting alone in that house, haunted by memories of Jenna, seemed unbearable. Emily opened the door almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting. Her face softened when she saw him, and without a word, she stepped aside, inviting him in. The warmth of her living room was a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of his own house, and Derek felt some of the tension in his shoulders release. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked gently, guiding him to the sofa. Derek nodded, exhaling as he took a seat. He hadn't intended to pour out his story, but as he sat there, surrounded by Emily's quiet attention, he found himself recounting the events of the past few days: Jenna's affair, the note, the photos, the final confrontation. Emily listened without interrupting, her expression a mix of empathy and understanding. When he finished, she placed a comforting hand on his arm, her touch warm, grounding him in the present. "She doesn't deserve you, Derek," Emily said softly, her eyes meeting his. "You didn't deserve any of this." Her words struck him, stirring a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. They sat there in silence for a while, the weight of the evening settling around them. And as the night grew darker, Derek felt a glimmer of something unexpected, a strange hope blossoming amid the ruins of his old life. In that moment he realized that Jenna's betrayal, brutal as it was, hadn't taken everything from him. There were still people who cared, still kindness, still chances to rebuild. And maybe, just maybe, there was something worth looking forward to on the other side of all this pain. As Derek sat with Emily in the warm glow of her living room, he began to feel something he hadn't expected, an unfamiliar ease, as if he were shedding a heavy coat he'd worn for too long. Emily's presence was like a balm, soothing the raw, angry wound left by Jenna's betrayal. She didn't press him, didn't ask for details, only listened with a gentle patience that felt worlds apart from the hostility Jenna had left in her wake. After a long silence, Derek finally looked over at her. "I don't know what's next," he admitted, his voice heavy. "Feels like everything's changed overnight, and I don't even know who I am in all of this anymore." Emily nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "I know it doesn't mean much now, but the fact that you're here, feeling all of this, speaks volumes. You haven't turned bitter, Derek. You're just hurt, but that will pass." Derek looked down, letting her words sink in. He could still feel the hurt, sharp and pervasive, but something in her words held a small promise, a reminder that maybe this wasn't the end of everything, just the end of what wasn't real. He felt the faintest spark of gratitude for Emily's kindness. Here she was, willing to hold some of his pain when he felt he might collapse under it. They talked late into the night, Emily drawing him out little by little, helping him make sense of the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. She made him laugh at one point, a dry joke about karma being a fantastic equalizer. It felt strange, this laughter breaking through the layers of sorrow that weighed him down, but it was a relief to feel something else. Around 2 in the morning, Derek realized he'd overstayed, though Emily didn't seem to mind. He rose from the couch, feeling the fatigue of the past days settle heavily in his bones. Emily followed him to the door, her hand lingering on his arm as she looked up at him. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out," she said quietly. "I mean it." Derek met her gaze, a warmth spreading through him at the sincerity in her eyes. "Thank you, Emily. I really needed this tonight. More than I can say." She smiled, a small, comforting thing. "Good night, Derek. And remember, you're not as alone as you might feel right now." As he walked back across the driveway, the darkness of his home didn't feel quite as oppressive as before. He felt something new, a delicate thread of strength unwinding within him. Emily's words echoed his mind, grounding him, giving him something to hold onto amid the chaos Jenna had left. The following morning, Derek began his day differently. He brewed a pot of coffee and took it out to the porch, watching the sunrise as he let the silence settle around him. There was a clarity in the morning light, as if each beam of sunlight was washing away fragments of his past piece by piece. He decided he wouldn't let Jenna's betrayal steal any more of his peace. She had already taken enough. The day passed slowly, a mix of mundane tasks and quiet reflection. By late afternoon, he found himself feeling stronger, even a bit more resolute. He was no longer the Derek who would wait for Jenna to change, to explain, to come back with some half-hearted excuse. He was a man who had been forced to confront the harsh truth and had survived it. Now, he would rebuild, with or without anyone's permission. Around dusk, he found himself glancing over at Emily's house, the light in her kitchen flickering on. He wondered if she'd meant what she said about him not being as alone as he felt. A part of him wanted to see her again, to hear that warm reassurance in her voice. But he didn't want to be hasty. Didn't want to rush into something new just to fill the void Jenna had left. For now, he would focus on himself, on picking up the shattered pieces of his life and finding a way to reassemble them into something strong, something worthy of the man he wanted to become. And maybe one day, when he was ready, he'd take Emily up on her offer for another late-night talk, and the journey forward would be just a little easier. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Derek stood in the doorway, feeling a rare sense of peace. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to walk it. The days after Jenna's departure passed like a gradual thaw. Derek began to fill his time with quiet, purposeful actions, cleaning out the remnants of her presence, reordering his routines, finding new anchors in the spaces she had left behind. Each day, the sting of her betrayal ebbed, replaced by a deeper understanding of who he was becoming on his own. He focused on small victories, each task an unspoken commitment to himself to move forward. One evening, as he was clearing out the last of her things from their bedroom, he found an old photo of them together. They were smiling, arms around each other, back in the early days when everything had felt so effortless. He looked at his own face, the trusting optimism in his younger eyes, and wondered if he could ever return to that kind of innocence. But as he looked closer, he realized something else: he didn't want to go back. That version of himself was gone, but it wasn't a loss. He was learning to value the clarity that came with experience, the strength he had gained by facing the truth head-on. A knock on his front door interrupted his thoughts. Setting the photo aside, he went to answer, surprised to see Emily standing there, a hesitant smile on her face and a covered dish in her hands. "Hey," she said, her eyes warm and a little uncertain. "I made extra lasagna and I thought, well, you might not feel like cooking tonight. I hope it's okay." Derek's surprise softened into gratitude. "That's more than okay. Thank you, Emily." He stepped back, inviting her inside. The two of them moved to the kitchen, and Emily placed the dish on the counter, pulling the cover off to reveal a perfectly baked lasagna, bubbling and fragrant. "Smells amazing," Derek said, chuckling softly as he reached for plates. "I didn't realize you were this good of a cook." She laughed, the sound filling the quiet space like a warm balm. "I'm not actually. This is a family recipe, one of the few I can make without burning down the kitchen." They served up portions and sat at the small table by the window. The silence was comfortable, each of them savoring the food, but Derek could feel something different about tonight. Emily seemed more relaxed, her guard down, her presence as natural as the setting sun casting warm light over the room. As they finished, Emily looked at him with gentle curiosity. "How you been holding up?" "Really?" "Really?" Derek hesitated, weighing his words. "Better, I think. There are moments when it all hits me, but I'm learning to take it in stride. I think the hardest part was realizing how much I'd invested in someone who wasn't invested in me." Emily nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I can only imagine. But you've come a long way, Derek. I can see it in you. You're stronger than when I first saw you that night." Derek met her gaze, feeling a warmth stir in his chest, a subtle but undeniable pull toward her. He realized how much he valued her presence, how much he looked forward to these moments with her. She had become a steady presence, an anchor in the storm of uncertainty he'd been weathering. It was a feeling he hadn't expected, but one he was beginning to cherish. As the evening stretched on, they found themselves talking about lighter things, their shared neighborhood quirks. Stories from work. Moments of unexpected laughter that felt like little glimpses of a new beginning. Emily's laughter filled the spaces where pain had once lingered, and Derek felt a shift within himself, an opening to something beyond the bitterness of betrayal. When Emily finally rose to leave, she hesitated at the door, glancing back at him with a soft smile. "You know, Derek, if you ever need company, even just for a walk or a late-night coffee, I'm just next door." Derek smiled, the sincerity in her offer grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. "I'd like that. A lot." As she left, Derek stood in the doorway, watching her silhouette disappear into the evening. The street was quiet, the air cool and fresh, filled with the scent of autumn leaves. He looked up at the sky, the stars blinking into focus, and felt a kind of peace settle over him. For the first time, he could see his life stretching out ahead, not as a path he had lost, but as one he was just beginning to find. That night he went to bed with a sense of calm that felt as if it had always been waiting for him, just beyond the chaos of recent weeks. He drifted into sleep with thoughts of Emily's smile and the warmth of her laughter, the easy way she seemed to fill the empty spaces in his life. The next morning, Derek awoke with a quiet resolve. There were things he still needed to confront, still pieces of his past to let go, but he felt ready. He spent the day clearing out the last remnants of Jenna's things, each item a small victory, a deliberate reclaiming of his space. As evening fell, he glanced out his window and saw Emily in her garden, her figure lit by the soft glow of the porch light. He felt a pull to go over to join her in the easy companionship they'd found together. And as he watched her, he realized that, for the first time, he was stepping forward not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of hope. He took a deep breath and stepped outside, each step steady, purposeful, a journey towards something he was finally ready to embrace. It wasn't just about healing or moving on it. It was about discovering the life he could call his own with people who valued him for who he truly was. And in that moment, as he walked toward Emily, Derek knew he was no longer defined by Jenna's betrayal, but by his own strength, resilience, and the promise of something new.